Hey, if you like my videos, you might also like my comedy series YouTube Blue, which premieres every Saturday on the YouTube Blue YouTube channel. Go check out the link in the description and the card above to watch the latest episode. Now on with the video. In August of 1993, the first episode of Power Rangers aired on Fox Kids. It soon became the most popular kids show in the world, and the rest is history. But believe it or not, this wasn't actually the beginning of Power Rangers. There was actually a previous incarnation in the Power Rangers franchise, from a time before it was even called the Power Rangers franchise. And it's been lost for 35 years. This is the story of Bioman, the Power Rangers season that wasn't. In this video, I'm going to talk about how it came to be, why it failed, and why it's so important to Power Rangers as we know it today that it did fail. Our story starts with a man named Haim Saban. Haim Saban was born in Egypt and grew up in Israel. In the 60s, he was a bassist in a band called the Lions of Judah, while also being the group's manager. After his involvement with the band, he moved to France, where he was a music producer for a number of years. After forming Saban International Paris in 1977 as a record company, he eventually discovered through managing clients that international TV productions needed music for their shows. So in 1980, he founded Saban Productions with Shuki Levy to get into the TV music game. By the mid-80s, Saban Productions had a pretty good working relationship with Deke Entertainment, producing music for their animated shows. Eventually, Haim Saban took a business trip to Japan in 1984. While flipping through the channels in his hotel room, Haim Saban discovered Choudenshi Bioman, what is now considered the 8th season of the Super Sentai franchise. He immediately fell in love with the show, and when he came back to the US, he came up with the idea to bring Choudenshi Bioman to the States. To do this, Saban had two options, both with their own flaws. One was to do an English dub of Bioman. This would be very cheap to produce, but also probably wouldn't get picked up. The age of producing English dubs of live-action tokusatsu shows was over, and they were no longer profitable. The other option was to completely remake the show, but that would be very expensive. Not only would just making all that action footage be expensive in and of itself, but they'd either have to recreate all the Choudenshi Bioman costumes or have them all shipped from Japan. And both options would be so expensive they might as well just make an original show that was similar to Choudenshi Bioman. But then they came up with a compromise. They realized that because the heroes wore helmets that covered their faces, all of the expensive to produce special effects footage didn't show the faces of the actors or stuntmen inside. So they could reshoot all of the cheap, non-special effects heavy scenes in the US with American actors and then just fill in the gaps with the Japanese footage, dubbing it over with the American actors. This would make for a pretty inexpensive show that also allowed them more creative control to make the show more suitable for American audiences. By 1986, they completed work on a pilot episode for a Choudenshi Bioman adaptation known by its international name, Bioman. The fact that the name was just Bioman will be kind of important later on. So you'll notice that the names of these Rangers are pretty much the same as in MMPR, with the exception of some last names and the Red Ranger's name. The pilot starred Mark Dacascos as Victor, the Red Ranger, Miguel Nunez as Zach, the Green Ranger, Tom Solardi as Billy, the Blue Ranger, Trisha Fisher as Trini, the Yellow Ranger, and Rebecca Staples as Kimberly, the Pink Ranger. But what was the pilot itself about? Well, we know from some promotional material that it would have been about 5 teenagers with identical biorhythms gaining superpowers and joining together to form a team to fight against the evil half-man, half-robot Zadar. For any of you who may be familiar with Choudenshi Bioman, that's basically the plot of that as well. Zadar is an Americanized name for the main villain of Bioman, Dr. Man, and the Rangers themselves are just kind of generic characters to replace the Bioman. Some of them would be similar to the MMPR counterparts. For example, Victor was a martial arts expert, similar to how Jason would be a martial arts instructor. Also, Kimberly was a clumsy aerobics instructor, which I guess is sort of similar to her gymnastics shtick in MMPR. The other characters were very different. Zach is a detective who in the pilot is investigating terrorists. Billy is an athletic heartthrob, and Trini is an intelligent, aspiring novelist. The pilot never ended up getting picked up. It was passed around for a few years, but no one wanted to touch it, presumably because the Japanese footage aspect either seemed out of date or confusing. But later, in 1992, Haim Saban showed this pilot to Margaret Loesch, the president of the Fox Children's Network, the company in charge of Fox Kids, after Saban Entertainment had already helped to produce the X-Men animated series. Margaret Loesch loved it and believed in the idea of the show. Why she liked the show and others didn't is a story for another time. But obviously, at this point, she wasn't going to pick up Bioman as a series. The pilot had been made 6 years prior, the actors were too old, and the footage was outdated, so a new pilot was greenlit to adapt a newer season of Super Sentai, in this case, Kyoryu Sentai Choudenshi, and the rest is history. We still don't have the full pilot episode. It's lost, presumably sitting somewhere in Saban's vault. What footage we do have comes from a proof-of-concept trailer for Power Rangers called Galaxy Rangers that was produced in 1992 and sent to Bandai America to give them a feel for the show before it went into production. From the trailer, they spliced together some American footage from Bioman with footage from Choudenshi, complete with a narrator and background music. This ended up coming out as a special feature on a DVD set a few years ago. The question you might be asking is why we have this, but not the full pilot. The answer is probably legal issues. Saban, or maybe now Hasbro, though it's unlikely, does not have the rights to the Choudenshi Bioman stock footage, or at the very least, the DVD distributor doesn't. So while they were able to release that trailer that has original footage shot by Saban and Choudenshi footage that they have the rights to, they can't release Bioman. Sure, it could get leaked online, but if that happens on purpose, Saban could have a lawsuit on their hands because it could have only come from one place. So unless it leaks or Saban buys the rights to Bioman for some reason, we won't see this pilot. But there's another lesson to be learned here. At the beginning of this episode, I promised that I would reveal why this not being the first season of Power Rangers is actually a good thing. Well, the reason why is because having Choudenshi as the first installment really shaped the franchise. As you can probably tell, the Bioman pilot was for an American translation of Choudenshi Bioman. Sure, the characters and plotline would have been Americanized, but the main plot, all the villains, everything, would have been as close to the source material as possible. And that's just not Power Rangers to me. The fun of Power Rangers is that it's so different from Super Sentai. Why would I watch Power Rangers if it was just American Super Sentai? Samurai. But Choudenshi's plot was too weird to be translated. For those of you who don't know, here's the plot of Choudenshi. 150 million years ago, 5 tribes of humans lived in peace with the dinosaurs. But then an evil witch named Bandora and her cohorts hunted the dinosaurs to extinction. Each of the 5 tribes elected one warrior to be a part of a superhero team called the Choudenshi's. And together they sealed Bandora away on the planet Nemesis. In the present day, 1992, astronauts have freed Bandora and she's terrorizing Earth. So Barda must free the Choudenshis from their 150 million year hibernation so they can come back together and beat Bandora again. No way would that work on American TV. So they completely reworked the story, and I think that set a precedent for the format of the show that would ensure its popularity and long life. So yeah, it's good this never happened, but I would still like to see that pilot. What do you think? Do you want to see the Bioman pilot? Would you have liked to have seen a full Bioman series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for daily videos on the franchises you love, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.